It is my pleasure to welcome you to another lecture in the New College Alumni Speaker Series. My name is Colin Swift, and I have the honor of serving as an alumni ambassador here for New College. Now, the response to this event has been truly exceptional, and it's wonderful to see so many members of our new and U of T community gathered to explore a topic that resonates deeply with all of us: how we cultivate happiness, sustain wellness, and create balance in our personal and professional lives. We're especially pleased to welcome Professor Eili Weisbaum and alumna Niya Bajaj, whose presentation promises to offer both insight and inspiration. But before we proceed, I invite you to join me in a land acknowledgement, customized for tonight's event. So for thousands of years, the land we are on has been the traditional land of many indigenous peoples, including the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We take a moment now to acknowledge those who came before, those who provided stewardship to the land, and those who continue to share their teachings with us. We can also take this time to acknowledge those who cannot be with us today, who have been stewards in our families, in our friendships, and in our communities. We can take a moment to become aware of the earth beneath us and all our relations that support us to live each day. The trees that provide oxygen, the sun that helps the trees to grow, the bees that pollinate the trees, the water that sustains all life. We know that if any of these cease to exist, we would also cease to exist. So let's take a moment to be in wonder and have gratitude for the vast visible and invisible ecosystems of which we are part that allow us to live each day. We also recognize a legacy of colonial systems that impact all aspects of our practices to the best of our ability. Through our participation in this work and in holding ourselves accountable, we carry forward a commitment to listen, learn, and grow. Now, before we move on, a quick housekeeping note. Tonight's event is being recorded, so if you have any concerns, please connect with the registration desk to air them. Having said that, it is now my great honor to introduce someone whose leadership continues to strengthen our community's commitment to both academic excellence and holistic well-being. Please join me in welcoming our principal, who will officially open tonight's program. And here I speak about you, Professor Robert Ghazali. No, stay here so we can all admire you. Professor Robert Ghazali earned a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service with a focus in international economics from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service and completed his PhD in economics at the University of Michigan. After 8 years in the Department of Economics at Williams College, Professor Ghazali joined the University of Toronto's Department of Economics in 2012, where he is currently Professor Teaching Stream and formerly the department's Associate Chair of Undergraduate Studies. Professor Ghazali's research has investigated how an individual's willingness to act pro-socially depends on what others do. In the classroom, he received an Arts and Science Outstanding Teacher Award in 2022 for his dedication to enhancing student learning and experience. He serves on the university's academic board and its planning and budget committee. In 2024, he was installed as the 14th principal of New College, so please join me now in welcoming Professor Ghazali. Thank you, Colin. Over to you.
So first off, Colin, thanks for that kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. And so one of the things about being principal is you go to events. Like, little did I know that that should be like the number one part of the job description, go to events. Now, there are events that I have to go to, and there are events I get to go to. This is one of the latter. No lie, this has been circled on my calendar for months, and I am just so excited to welcome you all here for tonight's event. Gatherings like this remind me of what makes New College such a meaningful community. It's a place that values connection and curiosity, where we explore ideas, learning from one another. The Alumni Speaker Series gives us a chance to do just that, right? And I want to thank all of you for being here and for continuing to stay connected to the college. At New College, we strive to find innovative ways to move learning beyond the classroom, connecting it to our lives and the communities we are part of. Now, this ethos lives in our community engaged learning program, as well as New One, Learning Without Borders, which fosters intimate learning opportunities for first-year students in community engaged courses focused on social responsibility. It lives through our newest course, the Happy Mind, Scientific Perspectives on Wellness, a course developed and run by one of our speakers today, Eili Weisbaum. This course explores the science of well-being and asks what makes a happy and fulfilling life. Now, that course echoes programs offered by our Office of Residence and Student Life, such as peer support initiatives and wellness workshops. The common thread is reflecting on the importance of nurturing both the mind and the person, especially in a time where it can be easy to lose sight of this balance. And so tonight's event offers us an opportunity to pause, to reconnect and explore what it means to live well, to care for ourselves and each other while learning how happiness is not an abstract idea, but something we can actively cultivate together, which is why I'm excited to introduce our two remarkable speakers. Professor Eili Weisbaum is an assistant professor teaching stream in New College's Buddhism, Psychology, and Mental Health program, with a joint department to the Department of Psychiatry in the Temerty Faculty of Medicine, and cross-appointed to the Dalai Lama School of Public Health. She is an endlessly curious human, and I can tell you, if you spend about 1.5 minutes with her, you're like, it's true. She is an endlessly curious human being whose teaching and research focuses on the intersection of contemplative practice, mental health, and organizational culture. Her work is dedicated to creating conditions where individuals and institutions can truly flourish, helping us understand mindfulness and wellness not as goals to reach, but as practices we can develop and integrate into our daily lives. Niya Bajaj, a proud New College alumni, best-selling author, champion of mental health, award-winning mentor, and philanthropist, and she's blushing right now. I love it. Right? She's a certified holistic yoga therapist and narrative medicine facilitator. A longtime alumni volunteer, mentor, and donor to the New College community, Niya graduated with a major in sexual diversity studies and minors in English and psychology. She builds on her interdisciplinary education as an accredited yoga therapist who helps leaders eliminate fatigue so that they can stay focused and present to create the impact they desire. Niya has coached over 1,500 people leaders through Mindfulness for Leaders programs and delivers wellness-centered leadership learning experiences that support organizational culture change for improved employee well-being, engagement, and performance. Through her work, she helps people reconnect with purpose and create cultures that support authentic well-being. Together, Elli and Niya will invite us to explore both science and the lived experience of happiness through practices and insights that we can use in our lives starting this evening. But before we begin, I want to explain a little bit about tonight's agenda, as it's going to be both engaging and informative. Right? So Elli is going to begin with a short presentation focusing on the science of well-being, right? Followed by remarks from Niya. They will then have a conversation about their experiences and research. Throughout the evening, they're going to weave moments of audience participation and reflection, and they will guide us through short grounding exercises, and Elli will guide us in mindful breathing and provide brief instructions for a self-guided mindful tasting practice that you can engage in during our 10-minute intermission with light refreshments. I told you this was going to be interactive. Right? And then to close, Colin will return to help field your questions, while Elli and Niya will continue to share insights and offer practical mindfulness tools during the discussion. This evening will bring together knowledge, reflection, and connection in a true New College fashion. And so again, I thank you so much for joining us. Let's now welcome Professor Eili Weisbaum and Niya Bajaj.
I think I'm all set. Yep. All right, I'm just starting a timer because as we were sharing beforehand, I've been giving 3-hour lectures. And I'm going to take just 15 minutes to have a bit of a fun adventure through some science before we pass it on. And then I'm looking forward to the Q&A to really dive in a little bit more. I love implementation science. I don't just want to theorize about it. I really want to equip us with things that we can integrate in daily life. And I love to nerd out on the science. So we're going to start there. I will time myself so I don't mistakenly give a 12-week lecture, which next year, I was just sharing, my parents are 79. They live nearby. They've been secretly sneaking into the back of this course that our wonderful principal let us start, The Happy Mind. So they've been joining my undergraduate students in exploring that. So 12 weeks next year if you want to dive in further. All right. So, to orient myself, we're here to explore this topic of happiness and wellness. And before I get into the science, I'm just curious as a researcher to collect some data on this room. Consent, participating in this part of the data collection will not change your relationship to us. And please raise your hands if you've ever tried a kind of meditative mindfulness anything. Just curious. Yeah, okay. How about, who would say they have like a regular, consistent mindfulness practice? Much less. How about like, I think that's a great idea, but I don't usually have time for it. Okay, great, thank you. And then just a few more data points. Who here would say in the last month they've had some anxiety? Yeah, okay, all right. How about some stress? Okay, good. How about some happiness? All right, so just some interesting stats from asking up here that we can see that many of us are obviously curious about this topic and that there's some barriers to having it as a regular thing. We'll probably get into that at Q&A. And then also this other thing I'm really interested in, that almost everyone in this room, so I would say a significant finding, has had anxiety and stress and happiness. And so I also want to say as we explore this topic, what is happiness, what is the potential for cultivating it in our lives, that there's real hope and potential here, that it's something we all have capacity for. And to also normalize that stress and anxiety can be healthy parts of being human, and they can overwhelm us. And so this is something that I hope can be part of our conversation. So you heard a bit, I wear a lot of different hats here that I love. I also want to share, I've trained and been part of Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Zen master who was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King for many years. And so I love to nerd out on both the science and like the roots of some of these teachings. And I'm really, as Bob said, I try and summarize all these things, endlessly curious. How do different knowledge streams, different social, cultural contexts inform the kind of work we're doing? So this is something that we already nerded out about before this talk and we'll keep talking about today. Also, apologies, when I'm excited, I can talk fast, but I'm giving myself permission to go at kind of like a grand rounds pace, if anyone hears from healthcare. When I present in the hospitals, gonna go fast for the science. We'll have a bit more time at the Q&A. So I want to talk a little bit about what is some of the science, what are we seeing from an evidence base on this term burnout, or what we might call unwellness. We're seeing this in kind of epidemic proportions across so many sectors of our society right now. So this is a slide that I shared in the happiness course for my undergrads that I thought you would like as well. What is the research on being human? Like, what do we see from an evidence base? And so there's this sentence that we have a lot of evidence for. This comes from the World Health Organization's report that said humans are intrinsically social beings. So there's something really important in relationality to others, that 2 decades of research from the World Values Survey found positive associations with time spent engaged in activities with others, and that this increases wellness, and that our social relationships are one of the greatest predictors of health over a lifespan. And this is so fascinating to me. There's another study that kind of connects to this that showed this analysis of the magnitude of effects of social relationships. And those are relationships not just where we're like complaining with our colleagues about what's going on. We mean social relationships where you feel seen and valued, which is an interesting thing. And one of the practices I might plop in tonight is actually designed to enhance that state of connection. So we'll try a like 2-minute practice around that. But that it's on par with risks for mortality comparable to well-established risk factors of like smoking and alcohol consumption. So it's this thing that really matters. And I wanted to take a moment, this term burnout. We hear this a lot. It's in the literature. People are saying they're burnt out. I do a lot of work in healthcare and education. And I kind of took a moment just to contemplate this word over the summer. I wasn't in classes. Things were a little slower. I was doing some writing. And I took a moment to really think, because I think when we say words a lot, they can kind of lose their meaning. They kind of numb us to what that is. And as someone who's curious, I thought, are we accepting something? And what is it we're accepting? And if you read the literature on burnout, if you read the way it's defined in the ICD, so there's actually like a clinical diagnosis of burnout, it's that the way we are living and working is making us unwell. That's very interesting. We say there's burnout in healthcare, there's burnout in education, there's burnout in academia, there's burnout in society. What we're actually saying, what's evidence-based in the literature, is the way we are living and working is making us unwell. So then I get curious about that. I'm like, that doesn't sound great. Why are we doing that? And so some of the practices we're going to look at today are looking at how we might have some shifts in that way of living and working. And so why does it matter? Why do I care? Why might you care? There's some great stats. This came out of UC Berkeley. Balanced, happy people are more productive, more creative, more collaborative, better long-term goal pursuit, more likely to find employment, psychologically resilient. So these things that I think contribute both to our own happiness and hopefully also to the collective wellness of our societies. And I just want to share that this is from the World Health Organization, their definition of wellness. So as we unpack this topic today, it's not just the absence of something, it's the presence. And the presence of something, the bad news is, it requires us to do something, to make something present. The good news is that we have some great ways to do that. But sometimes if we're going around like, I'm not well, what's going on? You know, it might be, have we spent time? So with our undergraduate students, I'm very excited. In this space, we're launching a new college scientific day in 2 weeks where students are making posters from the course on research they've done. This was shared in the first class, and we asked them to design a poster that reviews literature on an area of challenge or difficulty in the world. Some have picked environment, some have picked economics. They come from all disciplines. We had so many students sign up for this course. And then we've asked them to pick an activity that they think would enhance emotional, physical, or social wellness. So they're going to be presenting their scientific posters in this room. So we're excited to have a science party at the end of the class. So I just want to say, before I get to some wellness pieces, that one of the things that can be quite challenging if we think about the barriers to cultivating our own wellness, to bringing the presence of something, is our negativity bias. I like to say, from a neuroscience perspective, our brain is often really trying to help us survive. Like, it's great. It really, really wants to help us survive. But it's not always accounting for thriving. That's not what the neuroconnections are built for. And so one of the things our brain is built for is to have what we call a negativity bias, because it is more useful from a survival perspective if you go into the woods to remember where the tiger ate your friend than where the pretty flowers were. It's just like, you're gonna survive more. And that means when we walk through the woods or our lives where unexpected things happen, we don't remember walking by the beautiful flower, right? We have a selective bias to remember the terrible thing that happened. So at the end of our week, when we're like, oh, that was a terrible week, right? That can sometimes be true. I want to be very careful also as we go through the evening. In my field, we're not suggesting that these practices that often look at cultivating joy, happiness, noticing gratitude, is to suppress or ignore the difficulties and challenges in our lives and the world. Sometimes it can be heard that way, that we're suppressing. But more so, we're really curious in balancing some of the tendencies of our mind to overwhelm us, to make us afraid. Not because we want to run away from our challenges, not to ignore the systemic issues of oppression that exist in our society. Actually, we want to foster enough of that internal psychological resilience that we can turn right towards them and take care of them. So it's an interesting connection we have in the science, is actually cultivating some of these wellness and gratitude practices equips us to meet the challenges in different ways. And one of those is to look at kind of challenging this kind of negative potency. Are we going about our days constantly replaying the difficulties, the fears, the challenges, and really depleting ourselves? Or do we have some practices that help us to balance that can help us re-engage in the world in a more fulsome way? So that's a little bit about what your brain is doing. So then the question is, what can we do about it? The good news is what we find from the research and the evidence base is these are really trainable skill sets. So I often like to think of a meditative or mindfulness practice as mental fitness, right? Just like I would go to the gym to work out my muscles, I can do cognitive practices. This is often, if you look at and break down, like when I work with some Buddhist monks and I'm like, what do you think of this? They're like, yeah, that's great. That's totally what we're doing, which is we're making ourselves cognitively fit to meet our challenges. I also really like this metaphor because I often hear when I guide a practice, like, I'm bad at that, it doesn't work. And I'm like, yeah, I haven't practiced throwing a football. Like, if I went to a football field and threw a football, I'd be like, I'm bad at that, it doesn't work. This is the first time you tried something. So as we try practices tonight or in your life, if you ever try one of these, please be kind to yourself. There's no reason to get it right away. If you keep practicing something, you will get better at it. And if you haven't practiced it for a while because life has been really challenging and you had been good at it before, it might be challenging again. So the research all says the mechanism we want to activate with these practices is not perfection. We actually want to be our messy selves and see what it's like to try something out. And so why mindfulness and compassion? What's the case for it? It has a lot of great things it claims to do. Benefits personal well-being, empathy, cognitive performance, better focus, better working memory, better academic performance, moral reasoning, decreased anxiety and stress, enhanced perspective taking, just all these things. I presented a slide like this at MIT, and they're like, that's a really handy set of things to say that you happen to be able to take care of. And what I would propose to you is the reason we see these outcomes is just like with physical fitness. If you're physically fit, you see a cascade of physiological benefits. If you are mentally fit, you see a cascade of cognitive benefits. So we're really looking at something there that correlates. I love also talking about some of my specific areas. So there's some really interesting literature coming out on how this affects student wellness, particularly educators and clinicians. So caring for our caregivers, what does systems change? A big part of it is taking care of those that are active decision makers and facilitators of the environments. If the way we're living and working is making us unwell, there is often time and funding for programs for patients and students. And time and funding is not given to do that same kind of care for the caregivers. So that's something I'm very interested in. And then some really interesting outcomes for patients that I also will save for a lecture for another time, but lots we could talk about there. I want to now just share with you a little bit of the science that I love teaching through like kindergarten to like professional development, because I think it's nice language for you to take away today. So we're equipping you to go out and be mini scientists after this talk. So I want to talk about two parts of our nervous system. Our amygdala, so these are in our brain, and our prefrontal cortex, so our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system, and what they do. And to do this, I'm going to teach you something that I borrow from a wonderful researcher and colleague, Dan Siegel, called the hand model of the brain. You can do it with me if you want to lay down the learning. If we raise up our arm like this, this represents your brain stem, which dips into your body. It's in charge of something called interoception. How's my breath doing? Sorry, any neuroscientist, it's going to be an oversimplified brain. If we bend in our thumb, this represents your amygdala. This is the part of your brain in charge of your fight or flight response. If you fold over your fingers, this is your prefrontal cortex, in charge of your rational decision making. And when something upsets you, you flip your lid. You go offline, literally. So I want to just talk about the relationship between your amygdala, ready to fight or run, your prefrontal cortex, in charge of your executive, functioning, rational decision making. And they are very interrelated. And again, thank you, brain. You want to help me survive. It is more useful when you meet a tiger in the woods to be ready to fight or run. Great. Where this is not so useful is for something we call paper tigers. The same chemical reaction that gets you ready to literally fight a tiger in front of you or run, that same cascade of hormones that takes your executive, functioning, rational decision-making offline can be triggered by things like exams, job interviews, and a really mean text. right? And those are not so helpful. I was telling my students today, when you go to write an exam, you need your PFC. You need to retrieve information you have stored and articulate it. That is literally its job. And so if you're offline in that moment, you can't remember what you studied, your heart rate is up, what can you do? And so that's a bit of what we're going to talk about today, is what are some of these practices that we've seen can effectively care for our nervous system? And I like using the word care, not calm, because there are really good reasons to activate our stress. There are good stress responses. Our body's letting us know something important. There's good reasons to be angry. There's good reasons to even be outraged in a world where there are systems of oppression. Like, yes. And what do we do with that? How do we metabolize our anger, our frustration, our challenging moments? Ooh, that's my time. How do we metabolize challenging moments so that we can meet them with grace, with effectiveness? What does it mean? You know, if you go into a room, and I work with some policymakers, again, I'm not saying don't have those feelings. We're not trying to suppress anything. But it is a superpower for leaders. And all of you are leaders. Everyone has places where they have spheres of influence. Your families, the places you work. You could be a leader in a coffee shop and make a happier moment for someone, right? In those places where you have spheres of influence, it is a superpower to be able to be aware of what you are experiencing from the stimulus that you're receiving, that angry text, a difficult exam, seeing something that is unjust in the world, and being able to respond rather than react. So that's what the evidence shows. Good news. Everyone in this room has anxiety and stress, and everyone can cultivate skill sets to balance some of these negativity biases, some of these offline fight or flight reactions to engage differently with yourselves and the world. And over your lifespan, the ability to have healthy relationships is what makes you well. So without further ado, I will pass it to my counterpart to keep the discussion going. Thank you.
Well, there's a tough act to follow. I'm going to boost this up. Is this easier for folks to hear? Yes? Amazing. So as also a very curious person, I've had the gift of cats in my life, my whole life, and if you are not curious, they will teach you how to be curious about the world. You've heard a lot about all of the awesome science. I get to apply this science every day, working with leaders, working with my students, and Elli is really right. The way we live and the way we work continue to make us not so well. My training is in yoga and yoga therapy, and the definition of wellness there is being in good relationship with yourself first, because if you are not in good relationship with yourself, good luck trying to be in good relationship with anyone else. Because what are you like when someone comes to you with a big idea, but you're a little hangry? You're able to hear that whole idea? Or when your very upset child comes to you and needs some support, but you have a migraine? How does that go for you? You're better able to take care of yourself. You're better able to show up for the humans around you. And that comes from the capacity to, regardless of where you happen to be, because this only takes about 30 seconds to do, is to notice what is happening for you, which requires a little bit of a pause. It takes a second to just be like, okay, what is my physical body feeling like? What is my breath feeling like? What is the maybe immediate emotion and the resulting thought? Because often the emotion will arrive before the thought. And then what are you going to do with that information? Who are you going to be? Are you going to be that hangry, snarly, I don't have time for this, thanks for putting in the effort, it's not interesting? Because I've had those days. What does that do to your relationship with that human? Are they more likely to come to you and share another shiny idea? Maybe not. Or maybe they'll extend you some grace. We hope we can do that for each other in those tough times. Bob mentioned a bunch of fun things that I get to do, including support leaders with mindfulness, which sounds like a nice, fun, like corporate, show up for 10 minutes, help people meditate, they'll feel a little better, and then you can leave. The program is a year long for a reason. Folks show up for at least an hour a month to learn a practice, and then we send them out to apply it. And we chose mindfulness and not emotional intelligence or psychological safety or another fun buzzword, because mindfulness is the anchor for all of those things. If you are able to pause and notice and decide, maybe you'll be a little bit more self-aware. And if you can be a little bit more self-aware, then maybe you can be a little bit more emotionally intelligent, which is not only noticing what you are feeling, but then choosing a values-aligned action. Because acting with purpose will also help mitigate some burnout, maybe not all of it. And I know Elli has way more science, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about that. But once you can be that little bit more emotionally aware, little bit more emotionally intelligent, you can start to create a slightly safer psychological space for the people around you, because you can manage your reaction to however they show up and whoever they show up as. So they might feel a little bit safer to show up and say, hey, I'm having a really hard time with this. And whether that's a little human in your life who has all the big feelings and isn't quite sure what to do with them, or that's a colleague who is struggling with, the loss of a parent or a really tough assignment that they don't feel like they have the skills for. Because once they can show up that way and they feel like they belong a little bit, which is the first phase of psychological safety, which sometimes we don't talk about well, you're more likely to hear all of the ideas in a room. And every organization I've been in has been like, oh yeah, we want all this inclusion stuff. Great. You don't get there if folks aren't mindful. It's really hard, and that's where it gets a little lip servicey, which is why I'm really lucky that I get to run a year-long experience for folks to start at the very foundation of that. And we've seen some pretty cool outcomes. Folks will now come to me and say, can you share the list of the participants so I know who to work for? Because those folks are better equipped to take good care of their teams and to deliver great results in an organization that is facing significant amounts of change. Many of you are experiencing that too, I'm sure. And so that little bit of mindfulness can help you find your way in. And it doesn't have to be a 10-minute formal seated practice unless that's your jam. We will chat through some options, mindful walking, mindful tasting. These are all routes into the practice. And so with that, I know we have a full agenda, so I'm going to stop sitting or standing up here, and we will move to posing some questions, because I have lots of questions for Elli. I was like, this is blinking in a not useful way. Amazing, thank you. Thank you also for all the science. I love nerding out. My probably first question for you is, when you tell people what you do, what is the biggest misconception that comes up?
So many. Also, so fun. We've gotten to meet a few times before this, and we were like, yeah, we got good vibes. And a lot of fun just to be in a space with someone to kind of have that trust to dive into this together. So really, everything you were saying, I was like, yeah, it's like we planned it. And yes, so misconceptions, so many. I don't even know where to start. Perhaps one of the ones that came up for me was how often, because you were talking about leadership, and I do, part of my appointment here at Temerty Medicine is to do ongoing work around applied mindfulness for clinician wellness. How might those folks apply it? And one of the interesting quotes that often comes out of the studies is physicians coming in to do training in mindfulness and accounting. I just thought it was like sitting on a cushion with my eyes closed for 20 minutes and just like hoping that held. Like somehow that would just last me the day. And I get this a lot. Just by a show of hands, who here thinks I'm gonna do mindfulness? I'm gonna sit with my eyes closed. Yeah, like a bunch of, that's what it is, right? And so this really interesting thing when they go through a course on applied mindfulness, right? How does it integrate in daily life if I don't have time to sit with my eyes closed? So I think that one's really interesting, is really equipping people with what are micro practices or ways to integrate it in my walking, my speaking, my listening. So one big misconceptualization it only works if we're sitting with our eyes closed in like a quiet, perfect space. So maybe I'll name like 2 more quickly, and then I'm curious the misconceptions you've heard and some of the ways that you break them down. I think another is that this field like is somehow claiming to be like a silver bullet like fix, right? Like do this thing, it'll just fix all your problems. And I don't think we really claim that about anything. Like as researchers or in healthcare, we're never like, don't worry, this one thing fixes everything. And so I think also often when I present this in like, especially education and healthcare settings, I put up an eye roll emoji to be like, hi, I'm here to do wellness, because people are kind of annoyed with me before I start. And I think, thinking about that, it's like if the way we're living and working is making us unwell, it could feel really frustrating to be told like, here's a 1-hour workshop, do better. So I think it also, for all of us who are curious about happiness and wellness, to think how we can be kind and curious to ourselves and others and bring these in a really like consensual, playful, open way. Because that concept of like, I'm telling you what to do right, I'm telling you to be well, and do it by sitting with your eyes closed, I think I hear those a lot about the field. And then that one I mentioned up there, that you can do it right or wrong, that's also a big one. We have a lot of things in our society and in an academic setting, I talk to my students about this, like learning means taking risks and sometimes being wrong. And yet I have to give them a grade. And if they want to get into med school, they have to get a good one. And so how do we set up a safe place to learn? So those are some that come to mind. Yeah, how about you? Have you met any of those friends?
So when people hear the words yoga therapy, there's sometimes a very specific image that pops up in their minds. And as I say this, I'm like, how many people are thinking this right now? They'll come to me and say, oh, so it means I sit in child's pose and I tell you about all my trauma. And I was like, if you want to do that, sure, we can do that, absolutely. But that's really not what I do as a practice. It is fundamentally sort of supporting your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, if that's of interest to you. But we can also talk about your financial health, your occupational health, your environmental health, because you are in relation with all of those systems and structures. And it really is, where are your values and what are they if you've never thought about them? And then how do you apply them in all of those relationships? It may be that we work with your breath. It may be that we do some movement. And if you want to take lots of fancy Instagram photos, we can get you there for sure. And if you want to sit in child's pose and tell me about trauma, we can do that too. But it really is, how do we repair this often damaged relationship with ourselves? Because systems and structures profit from that damage, sometimes significantly. And so how do you reclaim that power? The other fun thing when people are like, oh, what is narrative medicine? Which is another fun deep dive. And it really is, how do you engage with story? Because relationships are rooted in story. The stories we tell each other and the stories we tell ourselves determine what those relationships are like. And narrative competence is the fundamental practice of being mindful when someone is telling you a story. Because when was the last time, show of hands, someone listened to you really well? You felt like they were present with you. In the last week, did you have this experience? I was like, ask a question for show of hands and then ask for timing. In the last week, okay. So some of you, yes, but the majority of you didn't have that experience. Being able to cultivate this habit of, I'm going to gently focus, or maybe very aggressively focus my attention on the person in front of me and notice nonverbal communication, tone, and then the actual words they are saying. How does that resonate for me? What meaning am I making about what they are telling me? Because those might be two different things. And then what am I going to do with this? Because usually when someone tells you a story, there's an action embedded in there somewhere. And is the action they want me to take the same as the one that I want to take? And how do those dots connect? Often people are like, oh, you're going to come and tell us some stories. Neat. Sure, yeah, I can tell you stories. But I would love for you to learn how to listen. Because then you can take that information, especially if you're in a leadership space, and leverage that, whether it's stakeholders that are telling you stories, you'll get better product out of it. If it's your employees telling you stories, you'll get better engagement out of it. But it takes a while to explain that to people. So sometimes I just show up and tell stories.
Ooh, I want to jump in before we ask each other. This is fun. We're going to have a lot of fun. I hope you have it with us. It's just so fascinating because we both bring kind of different modalities that are focused on the same things. You know, I've spent time in corporate business spaces and more time in healthcare education. So we're kind of seeing that nexus in all of them. You know, surprise, it's relational, right? You have teams, you have people you're having to speak and listen to. Something I'm constantly fascinated by is that we somehow seem to think as a society that like speaking and listening is just something we'll like know how to do. And it's like, no, those are trainable skill sets. Those are really things we need to put some time and effort into. And so this idea of training our capacity to listen, I do work, and Thich Nhat Hanh like to say, the art of communication. And, you know, it's so interesting, and we'll run like mindful listening workshops or mindful communication, actually. And often people think communication means the speaking part, right? And more so, effective communication, and there's research on this, is our ability to listen. And the ability to listen means to have the ability to pay attention to the present moment. Because the words, the information is only here right now. So if you have no attentional regulation, right, and this is what we're teaching in a very like basic way, focus attention practice, one of the most research evidence-based practices is about noticing when your attention wanders and bringing it back to an anchor. Typically that anchor is the breath because it's free and always on you, right? And I want to connect this red dot, which is why sit down and notice when your mind wanders and come back to the breath, because the research shows our minds wander 49% of the time. And to effectively take in information, if you're a clinician, you want to hear what the patient's saying. If you're a researcher, you want to focus on your data. If you're a student, what's being said. If you're in leadership in a board meeting, right? You want to take in what's being said. And yet our minds wander. Here's a fun show of hands. Who here's mind has wandered since I started talking today? Right, like you stopped listening to me. That's your default mode network, your DMN. Your brain defaults to mind wandering, which is your social processing network to see if you're safe and okay. That's fine. And having some agency over when and how it wanders so you can be present and attend to what's in front of you is that first step, both in what my field would say is caring for your inner landscape, which is fun, and also that ability to know what's happening. We can maybe offer a little definition of mindfulness. There's no one agreed upon definition. It comes from many cultures in the world. When I do an ethics review, they want one, so here's the one I give. This comes from an amalgamation of a definition from Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh and the UK government's all-parliamentary report that recommended mindfulness be integrated into the public sectors of healthcare, education, business, and the criminal justice system. So some policy, some Zen, which is mindfulness is the awareness of what's happening inside and around us in the present moment with kindness and curiosity. So just simply, do I know what's happening around me? Do I know how that's affecting me internally? How can I be kind and curious in both those spaces? So, you know, I loved all of this dissertation I've just given was to simply say, the art of communicating, which is how we relate as humans, is less about talking and more about being able to take in the information effectively. And then we decide what we share. And so the art of listening and developing that skill set is like, as I said, it's like a superpower. And so we often say in our kind of mindfulness training, we're learning how to develop a field of listening, and that it is an incredibly wonderful skill set. So that's what you were making me think about.
I'm so happy to have inspired that. And both the listening internally and listening externally. Because often we are encouraged to tune out. My teachers like to say we sort of live from the neck up, and we tune out all of this stuff. Your body is not just there to carry your head from one destination to the other. It provides you with a lot of really important information. You mentioned interoception, and I wonder if you have a definition for it that you like, because I don't know that it's a word people know.
Interoception is a fun word. Another colleague here at U of T, Norman Farb, does a ton of research around interoception. And it's kind of like, what's a nice way to define it? It's the way to it's the way your brainstem is internally monitoring your body's signals. Do I have enough oxygen? What is my heart rate like? It's kind of how the brain gets the data from the body. The definition I like is to monitor and modify. And I think that's so interesting because it's also now the language we're using in terms of what does mindfulness give you as a skill set? The ability to monitor and modify. There are studies on interoception showing that mindfulness can increase your immune system's effectiveness, which kind of sounds like out there. And you're increasing your ability to be aware of what's happening internally. You're actually building a stronger connection for your mind's monitoring of your body, so that it gets the feedback when it needs to like monitor and modify your immune system. Yeah.
I love that because one of the core practices in yoga therapy is the capacity for interoception. It's why often my students are like, why don't I get to do a different practice every day? You do the same practice every day, ideally at the same time, so you have a set of data points over time. And then you can observe that information. Because, if you do the practice every Tuesday and your shoulder is sore, is that because you have a really awkward conversation with your boss every Monday and you're holding all that tension? And so Tuesday, that movement feels different than it does the rest of the week? What are you going to do about that? Maybe there's a way to make the conversation less awkward. Maybe there isn't, but maybe there's an additional movement. Maybe you go book a massage, whatever it is. And it's that capacity to notice internally what is happening. And then maybe there's an just-in-time modification that you make. Or maybe that's a long-term, how do I remove this stressor from my life? Not necessarily your boss, but,
We teach this practice. Everyone moves to the woods. And I wanted to jump in because it's so funny. You reminded me of another misconceptualization that I get that I'm curious if you've heard, which I think is a really big one and an important one to bring up. This idea that like doing a mindfulness or meditative or yoga practice is going to make me instantly feel great and well and calm. Why I say it like that is I think we've conflated like the first step of becoming aware is often what these practices are offering us. And I'm bringing this up knowing that you're maybe about to let us experiment on ourselves. That we've conflated this, I think, because the media has like touted this as like this great anxiety stress reducer, which it has the potential to do. I have seen it. I live with that. And I would say it's more likely when we first pause, when we turn our awareness to our inner landscape, our lives we're living and working in a way that's making us unwell. So guess what? The first time you do a practice, it's more likely that you discover that you're anxious and upset. And so people do their first practice and they're like, the practice didn't work. I was anxious and upset. And I'm like, wow, it sounds like it worked great. Now you know you're anxious and upset. So that's really step one. And I think it's really healthy and wonderful, right? Like if I don't know what's here, I cannot take care of it. So it's this really interesting thing. So I also invite you tonight or other times, if you try one of these out, don't be worried or blame yourself for doing it wrong if the result of the data you collect is like, I'm not doing great. Because I actually think that's wonderful. I think it's wonderful to know that I'm a mess. Because then I get to say, dear Elli, what do you need? I think sometimes we're hurting our own feelings by just like not if you had a friend or a partner who like never asked you how you were doing or asked if you needed any support, you'd be annoyed with them. And yet, do we do that for ourselves, right? Do we stop and say like, dear Elli, what's going on today? How are you doing? What do you need? And so I think often that's what a practice is at first. And it can be a little bit flooding if you haven't done it in a while or you've never done it. And then you get like the double down of being hard on yourself because not only are you all of a sudden like noticing the difficulty you have, you're also like telling yourself you did it wrong. So this is where I think there isn't a wrong way to do it. I say as like a scientist, if you pour in all the chemicals in the experiment and get the solution you wanted, like great. And if you pour it in and it explodes, like also great. You discovered something. So I really invite, because in a moment we're going to have a chance for you to lead us in something. I just wanted to put it out there, like the goal here is not to do something perfectly. It's to be like good researchers of ourselves and to collect some data. And that, for me as an endlessly curious person, is really fun. And one other thing I wanted to share, my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, that I studied under for many years, had this great saying, the way out is in. And would explain this like, in order to take care of others, we must take care of ourselves. And the good news is when we do that, like we already take care of others. Because I know from my own life, like when I do these practices, you know, the people around me can tell you if I did them in my day or not. Because how I show up at home, how I listen, how I speak is different. I told my students today, we're coming up to exam period, and I have a deep commitment. Before I mark, I always do a short practice to find out who I am. Because if I am grumpy, the comments and marks I give are different. And so I always tell my students, you know, I have a real ethical and moral commitment to being a teacher who shows up for them. And I ask them the same thing when they come to the class. So all semester, whether it's a research class I'm teaching or whatever we're doing, you know, it's like, what are our collective agreements? I love you say it lets you to notice your values and implement them. So I wanted to drop in, we're gonna try something in a moment, and don't worry about getting it right. Just, you know, the invitation is to be curious.
Be curious, but also to practice some agency, because it's not a popular consideration of yoga, but it is the practice of liberation. And I think to some degree, many of the practices you are trained in as well are practices of liberation. We exist in systems and structures that like to strip agency from us. They tell us who we're going to be, what we're going to buy, how we're going to show up. When you have data points of your own, you can choose all of those things. And the practice is super fun for that purpose. There was something else you said that triggered a thought that has now vanished. So I will lead us through a practice, which is 100% optional. And if there's something else you would like to do that would make you feel better instead, please feel free to do that. But what I invite you to do is feel free to adjust your posture if you've been sitting slouched a little bit. If you want to sit a little bit taller, you do not have to. If you would like to stand for this practice as well, if you've been sitting for a long time today, you are welcome to stand. And then from there, once you have found sort of a comfortable, if you'd like to lie down, please do. There isn't a very soft surface to do that on. But if you would like to, don't let me stop you. And then once you've found a comfortable shape for your body, whatever that looks like, I invite you to drop your gaze to the floor and notice what you can see. What's in your visual sphere? Shapes, colors, patterns, if you'd like, you can name these for yourself. And then if it feels comfortable, safe, and interesting, you might take your gaze up to the ceiling and observe what you can see there. Allowing your gaze to wander. Noticing light. Observing shadow. Maybe there are interesting textures. And then you might gently return your gaze through center and notice where there are doors in this space or other points of movement. You might turn and look to the side or look behind you. Just observing where you could move to if you needed to. And if you are turning or moving, what is the sensation like in your body as you do? Maybe there's a little popping, clicking, or cracking of joints, if like me, you're of a certain age now. And then eventually, maybe coming back to center. You can keep your eyes open, or if you'd like, you might bring them to a gentle close. And then maybe you tune in to the sensation of your breath. You might observe the shift in temperature at the tip of your nose as air becomes breath and you breathe in. And as breath becomes air as you breathe out. Maybe gently following the journey of breath from the tip of your nose, down your throat, all the way to the bottom of your ribs. And then the reverse of that as it flows out. And if there is mental chatter that comes up as you do this, just notice what it is. If there is judgment about the mental chatter, maybe gently set that aside for another 2 or 3 breaths. And then if your eyes are closed, you might gently blink them open, bringing your focus and your attention back to the shared space. If you feel called to sigh, to yawn, to wiggle, to stretch, please feel free to do all of those things, any of those things. And then you have some helpful tools for us for a little mindful tasting situation.
Thank you. It's always nice to remember I have a body. I was saying to my students, these kind of micro moments or breaks to our day can be such an effective way. Sometimes I become my projects, my emails. That's okay. Flow state is great. We studied that in the Happy Mind as well. And to come back to our bodies can be really helpful. So what I wanted to line us up to do, and again, you heard some great language also around a practice being invitational. This is so important. We all have different ways of cooking that up in our spaces. But I like to say, just like we would with a good research study with a participant, if this is research on ourselves, it's always nice to get informed consent from yourself. So am I okay to notice my body right now? What does that look like? So I always encourage that. So we're going to take a break in a moment. There's some delicious food. Washrooms are down the hall to your left, along with a water refill station. And I'm always curious about, sometimes I work in spaces and someone will be like, I'm going on break. And I interview physicians a lot. So I was like, what are you doing on the break? And they're like, I'm getting a coffee. I'm like, okay, that's what you're physically doing. What are you doing in your mind? And they reflect on this. And they're, as they wait for their coffee, they're thinking about their next patient, the difficult meeting they had. And I was like, that doesn't sound like a break. That sounds like an anxious, working inner dialogue time standing up that results in caffeine. So what I wanted to invite all of us to think about is on our break, our intermission, what is helpful to your nervous system? We're here to cultivate happiness and wellness. So maybe what would cultivate your happiness and wellness in this 10 minutes? And if it's that you need to check your phone and your messages and all these things, like that's fine. And what doors and windows do you need to open? Would you like to connect with another person? Would you like to walk outside and just breathe some fresh air? would you like, I'm giving some spoilers on other slides, there we go, to do a little mindful eating. I'm gonna just give some really quick tips on what you could try. It doesn't have to be the whole time. Maybe try 3 mindful bites. Maybe pick a buddy and be like, we're gonna try this and tell each other what happened. There's lots of ways of doing this. Mindful eating, I think, is really fun and interesting because we do this every day. So one of the studies I did, a leader said, mindfulness can be in situ at cost neutral times was their term. So it's if you're gonna eat food anyway, maybe take a little bit of that time to do this. It doesn't have to be the whole thing, and you can get some of the benefits that we're talking about. So lots of ways to do this. If you want, try it now. If not, try it another day. Mindful eating has the same basic foundations as everything else we talked about. Noticing when the mind wanders and bringing it back to an anchor helps us to be well. Because our mind wandering network is our kind of social anxiety network. Am I well? What happened? What's going on? That is great. It's really great to plan for the future and sometimes to give ourselves a rest. It's we're internally doom scrolling. And so I invite us to maybe think of food as another great anchor to care for our nervous system, right? When we're activating ourselves with all of our projects and our worries and fears, that's exhausting for us. So not suppressing and gifting ourselves a moment in the present. So food is a great way to do that. So just some ways you might try it is to not talk and eat at the same time. So if you find a buddy now or do it on your own, what would it be like to just eat the food while you're eating? Again, it can just be 4 bites. Sometimes at dinner, my family and I will time 5 minutes. We do 5 minutes of not talking, eating with some of these prompts. The way we speak and listen to each other for the rest of dinner, very different. I don't just throw up my day on everyone. I've had some time to get a read on myself, very helpful. So some tools to use when you mindfully eat, to stop and notice. So you have the breath as an anchor, and also the food. So we have our senses. How does it look? How does it taste? How does it feel? Look at its color first and then eat it. So there's lots of ways to play with stopping and noticing using your senses. Do one thing at a time. Often we're eating and also preparing the next bite and reading our phone. So the challenge could be put down the fork or the item, chew and swallow, pick it back up. It actually doesn't make it that much slower. So that can be one thing to do. Looking deeply is fun. Activity also really fun with kids, which is what do you see in the food? Would it exist without the sun? No, it lit a scientific fact. So can you see the sunshine? Can we see that a farmer was there, right? The rain. So take a moment to appreciate all the conditions that went into your food. And where's the food gone, right? What happens to the food? We are what we eat. Our body has this amazing way of metabolizing this thing. Do we even know how that works? So again, you could do all of these, one of these, but it's kind of a gift to your nervous system to take that moment. So if you like now with a bite of food, you can try it for a moment. If not, try it later. We're gonna take about a 10-minute break. So we will get started at 7:22. Let's give ourselves the time to walk in and out of the room. So we will be back. We hope you'll rejoin us. Think of questions for us. We just got to ask each other, but the plan for after the break is to answer your questions and give you one more top hit practice off the beginning. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you. There are some things like I have a few students where they're okay, yes, where we found a way for them to enter. So happy when he buys it. Sure, love you to short note on why.
But not those?
I'd love to, yeah. I do. I think I brought some. I tried, I can write it down for you, but I think on the way here I grabbed my cards. They might be in my coat here. Because I discovered the.
Thank you.
I might while you're talking. I don't know. I'm both insensitive and fairly mindful.
That sounds like I'm fascinating. Is insensitivity selective?
Yeah, like some people I think are too sensitive. And like, for example, it's funny because you're talking about of course you're talking about eating mindfully. And I do eat mindfully like today, like I'm fat right now, a little more overweight. It's not particular error. And like, I know it's because I have cancer, my cancer, it's been a stressful year, COVID, like I'm sure some last 2 years, the situation is super stressful. And obviously nobody likes me bored to begin with, and then like all the reactions, it's just so much. And so, obviously, etc. But I like to be very mindful of where I am, including all those things that sound stupid, driving. Yeah, but I'm very mindful. Like even I had to see if somebody's really going behind the car, so I like slow right down, make sure you don't hit something or scare them. Even I'm not into that, but it's shocking. Well, even like people when they stop, people open the doors without even looking. So that to me is shocking. Like that to me is literally people. They're not mean to touch me because they're somehow selfish. They're not selfish people. It's like I normally would praise people, but they just for some reason they don't consider so many variables in life. Yeah. Right. So that's why sometimes when people say things to me, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I like you're a brute. You're this. You're that. Yeah, it's okay. I'm okay with it. Yeah, well, I like to think I prioritize what's necessary, and I don't overindulge people who are like overindulged themselves. I try. Well, honestly, like you're saying, yeah, pretty in stress, but anxiety. I don't think I have anxiety. I don't think I have to. But I also I think my work life backwards. So I took my retirement from like late 20s till a few years ago, and then I went back to school and I love it. Well, it's a good way, only for you, because if you're gonna get married and have kids, you can't do it like that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So that's the caveat, and a lot of people don't want. It's a great gig if you can get it.
Yes.
But you give up a lot if you're like a regular person.
Yes, if you attend those classes.
Other classic milestones of life. Well,
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will be
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Oh my God, are you kidding? Yeah, and that's usually a lot. Usually, and by the way, if spending time by yourself, relaxing, or reading, or
Yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm glad. Yes. All the
that's
stuff you're
a
doing.
time taker too. It honestly is. It really is because you rejuvenate. And I remember one of the things I was why I got there. And they were doing North High School in North York. You have to have cameras at the time. Now they're low stuff. But at the time, they were doing practicing choreography. I was thinking one, but I didn't want there. And I was watching them all learn how to be creative. It is amazing. It is amazing sometimes. And you go with your friends and you have lunch and you cover theater, whatever. And you just like, whatever. And which is much more human, I think, than, like, don't get me wrong, I love working. I love it. But I love it right now because I've had that. And, like, I don't like meetings where we're
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd like to thank you so much.
When you're making music and vice versa, outside of school, why are you telling me this? Something so right from a research perspective, we call it our in and out facilities. That we love to find our trials, that we love to focus on this part of the and not, and then we don't care about it. We don't listen to each other. So another interesting outcome of some of these practices is shown to actually do something next to which is so important.
But you don't want to, or you won't?
No, I can't.
Oh,
So you'll answer that up there because
Because I was like, I can't just start with that.
that guy asked.
All right, I'll remind people that we were on a bit of a schedule here, so let's get everybody back at the seats and we can continue to learn about how to be mindful.
All right,
So,
we're going to do a quick little thing.
you want a song? Or
Yeah, I'm going to do it here.
you're going to call me back?
I'll call you back. All right, everyone, welcome. Take a moment to settle in. So for the next part of the evening, we're going to have the opportunity to hear some of your questions. And before we get to that, we thought we'd do a kind of mini practice to re-arrive. And it said in the program I was going to lead a breathing practice, but I had two things in my back pocket because I thought, ooh, I feel like we might cook up this idea that like mindfulness is more than breathing with your eyes closed, which is great. If you have time, closing your eyes and meditating for 20 minutes a day will change the structure and function of your brain. That's like a sentence right out of the literature. So that's great. And if you don't have time for that, or maybe you're a human who's sitting still with your eyes closed, one of my students with ADHD was like, I'm going to panic if we do that. And I was like, great, let's try something different. So I wanted to, and I had a great chat on the break that actually just inspired me to go with this one. Someone was like, I thought we were going to do things that like made us happy. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, let's try something. So I want to share with you, I call these some kind of micro practices. So things we can do in kind of short ways throughout our lives that have been shown in the evidence base to maybe increase some of this capacity for social connection, which makes us happy and well. As I said, it doesn't have to work or not. It's an experiment. So whatever happens when you pour in the chemicals is fine. Also, totally consensual. If this is not for you, you don't have to do it. And I wanted to share, I was invited to a few interesting spaces at U of T this year. The provost's office invited me to do like a retreat for leadership, and then I was doing like leadership over at medicine, and this one kept being a top hit. So I thought, okay, let's try it. And don't take my word for it. I always tell my students, we're in an academic space. Bring your critical minds. That doesn't mean like negative and I hate this. Critical is just notice what's happening. So what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce the activity. There's a few steps to it. And then I'm going to have you try it with some of your neighbors who are sitting near you. Again, if you don't feel like participating, just let people know I'm just going to listen. And I want you to be applauded for that. You know what's right for you right now. So check in what's going on. If it's just listening, please support each other to be a just listener. And if you're trying it out, that's wonderful as well. So this activity is called flower watering. If that's too flowery for you, sometimes we call it appreciation giving. I don't go into corporate businesses and tell people to water flowers, although sometimes I do. Someone was like, people think mindfulness is soft. And so for years we've been like, this is hard. And then recently someone I work with says, what's wrong with being soft? Maybe we need a little softness in our world. So I'm going to teach you this practice called flower watering. The first step, we can share this slide later, is who are you going to do it with? So today it's with the people you're sitting with, could be with your families, could be with your teams, your friends, or even yourself. A great place to use this is at the start of dinner with your families, or at the beginning of a meeting. I have nurses that started doing this before their rounds in emergency. And then each person simply turns. We often do it as like a circle. If you're in a meeting, in a huddle at a table, you turn to the person next to you. You say something about them, big or small, that you appreciate. Big or small. Could be like, I like your shoes. I wear these colorful shoes. So you might like my shoes. That's great. Or maybe you know the person better. Maybe it's big, like I really appreciate how you like show up. Or like, thank you so much for doing the dishes the other day. Or like, wow, you've really transformed this piece of you. Like it could be big, but it could just be like, great glasses, great smile, whatever it is, big or small. And then again, that the idea is not to like explain the whole thing. So you just kind of want to do like 1 or 2 sentences, like what would, scroll across the bottom of a news screen. So low stakes. And again, I'll talk right afterwards about some of the things this connects to in the literature, but I don't want to say too much. It's supposed to be micro practice. So in a moment, you're just going to kind of turn around and find like a group of like 4-ish. If you're 3-ish or 5-ish, that's okay. If you're just a listener, you're going to go just a listener. And I just want you to turn to the people around you and just one at a time, just in a circle, not everyone doing everyone, just one person does one, the next does the next. Something big or small. If you don't know them at all, pick something small that you appreciate. Just see how it goes. So I'll call you back in a few moments. I'm not going to give you too long, but just look around you. Find a few other people. Do some flower watering. Go ahead. We'll take about 1 more minute, so just keep on going. 1 more minute. All right, if you can hear me, clap. clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. If you can hear me, clap 3 times. If you can hear me, do a wiggle. If you can hear me, do a wave. And we're going to go back to our seats. Great way to get attention if you're teaching kindergarten through adults. Just briefly before we move on from that, thank you for participating in the experiment. Maybe for fun, because we have some mics, I'd love to collect a little data. Does anyone want to any comment on like what that experience was like for you? What happened? I'm infinitely curious. Yeah, someone at the front here. If we have a...
I was almost teary. I felt fast in this warm, that circle, the circle of the 4 of us.
So almost teary, kind of basked in some warmth of the circle. And I'll take a few comments and then I'll make a comment. Thank you. Anyone else just curious? Yeah, some folks here, do we have some mics we can get to them? That'd be great. Thank you.
We've known each other for years.
I was surprised when she used the word integrity about me. That's the last word I thought she'd ever use. Not that I'm not that way, but
She thought it meant she doesn't cross on red lights. That only, I'm not impressed by that.
Thank you. And I think there was someone else nearby, just behind you there.
It made me happy to make some flower watering comments. It made me happy to make some flower watering comments. Once when I did this before, it was not well received. And it caught me off guard that the person wasn't welcoming. And I didn't know what to do. And I often reflect on that moment and I still ponder about it.
Thank you.
Thoughts?
Yeah. And I'll make a comment. That's a good, we'll case that for one for questions. Yeah. Anyone else? One other comment? Anyone got something percolating? Yeah.
I just thought it was really sweet,
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
Like you said, nothing fancy, but just a few kind words can really go a long way.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for these little tidbits. And I know each of us had our own lived experience, could be comfortable or uncomfortable, no problem. And yeah, I wanted to say that moment of connection, human connection, right? We are intrinsically social creatures. And so we often say simple, not easy. It can be complicated. It could be received in a different way. And also to notice when we water other people, we get some of that, right? Our own internal landscape, we are made up of the actions we take, right? We say in mindfulness, we consume beyond edible food, what we speak, how we listen. So I'll leave it there because we want to chat more. And just thank you for participating in the experiment and to take home with yourselves. Maybe it's not so much work to do some little flower watering for yourself and for others. So this is something I hope you will take with you, bring in the world. Sometimes you have to check in on consent. Sometimes I've had friends who are like, Elli, I thought you were really disingenuous for a while because you kept saying these nice things. And we're in this like transactional society. I just thought you were like buttering me up. And they were like, oh, you really like people. So yes, sometimes it might not land also because we're used to the critique. So we have to consider that piece. And also we never know. Maybe something was hard for someone to receive, but later, we don't know. When you plant a seed and water it, you don't know what happens. So with that, please come on up and direct us to our Q&A.
So this is your opportunity to ask any questions you might have of our panelists. And I will start with one of my own that I was thinking about. You have a friendly, positive audience here. Thanks, Viola. So can we turn this up at all? Is there a volume on this? Brenda, is there a volume control on this? Or do I just have to get closer? Maybe I just need to get closer. There we go. Hey, I can even pick it up. That works too. I've learned many things today, but I digress. You've got a friendly audience here who have reminded me that I was not being heard. But in cases where there is more resistance in a business setting where people are expecting to be more transactional, as you said, what's the best way that you've found to overcome that and bring them in, as opposed to telling them to join, but bring them in a way that they feel that they took that positive step themselves?
So this is an old fundraising trick, and I offer deep gratitude to all of my first teachers here at U of T who taught me this. When you face resistance, there are usually 3 areas you can talk about. The logic, the data, you go for the head. Are there lots and lots of papers that I can cite that will convince them because we have this giant evidence base? Or is this an emotional reaction that's causing this resistance? In which case, I'm going to pull out all my therapy skills and be like, where is this resistance coming from? Maybe there's some trauma from a previous practice, hopefully not, but who knows? And if that doesn't work, then I start to talk about dollars. So head, heart, and wallet are the 3 things I will get to. And usually by the time I've gotten to the dollars, they're willing to consider, if for nothing else than the bottom line, why this might be something for them to explore.
I was writing bottom line as you almost said it. We've got some entanglement going. Yeah, and great question. And I have presented in those spaces. I get invited sometimes to do grand rounds, do leadership training. Sometimes it's made mandatory. And I think I mentioned earlier, I do often start with like a slide that has like an eye roll on it, just to really recognize what's in the room. So I think I bring my own openness and awareness and curiosity is often like the first start to be like, so you're being forced to be here. Who's thrilled? And that's a mindfulness practice, aware of what's happening around us. Just to bring in, we say sometimes mindfulness is making the invisible visible. And so I really try and do that with the skeptics. Just be like, who here thinks this is a weird, bad idea? And I almost always get some hands, which I also think will speak to like, how do you start a space with some psychological safety? And I'm always like, great, I'm so happy to have you here, because I genuinely am. And I like to throw it to that person as we kind of go through the class, if they, I can tell if they can handle it. I want to share a specific piece of data in one of the research studies I did. I had a surgeon come up, it was a 5-week mindfulness training, comes in the first session and is like, Elli, expletive, nice to meet you. But like I think mindfulness is like expletive. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I'm here to skew your data, but it's a research study, so I came. And I was like, excellent. I was thrilled as a researcher because that's what you're, like baseline there. Let's start there. And what's fascinating, I think, about working with surgeons, with folks in business, really with anyone whose mindset is learning. Like all of you are here, I would imagine you're somewhat curious about learning. You came tonight. And so by the second session, when we were open, we were clear, we cited our sources, we invited everyone in warmly. A lot of what you're hearing us do tonight, right? That's how we deal with the skeptics, is we bring our full selves, our passion, our confidence in our work. Comes the second week and was like, it made sense. I tried it every day before surgery. It works, let's do more. And I was like, whoa. So I think also just meeting that kind of potential for skepticism with a warm welcome, I find works quite well. And also this piece is, when we talk about what the literature is saying, and I would hope as a human that we just saying that like we're unwell, that we're suffering, that like burnout is leading to like broken relationships and depression, that like that would be worth caring for. To me it is. And if we're going into corporate spaces, educational, healthcare, the literature also shows that our individual level of wellness impacts our entire delivery systems, whether it's healthcare, education, business models, economics, environment. We have wonderful research being done by our principal here on like altruism being affected by like the behavioral spaces you're in. So there's this really interesting bottom line, if anyone here wants the case policy, that companies make more money. Healthcare delivery systems are more effective. Education and students have better outcomes. That's all there. And so I think that is a strategic way to open that curiosity. And then the secret, don't tell anyone, is then we teach people to love themselves and each other. It's very nice. Thanks for the question.
All right, any questions from the audience? We have people with mics. Bell, is somebody right there?
Yes, hi, I'm curious. We talked a lot tonight about social connection, and many of us here have children and grandchildren, and I'm wondering what the impact of social media and some of these, human-like characters that are developed by AI and whether that impacts, our younger children going to social media and using that as the interaction as opposed to another human being. I'd like to hear your comments on that.
So, interesting question. I actually had this conversation for a significant amount of my course this afternoon. The students in it were asking it because we were reading literature on mindfulness being integrated into education. And they were curious about it, and then for themselves, right? They're mostly 19 to 23. The short answer is yes, it is having an extreme impact on our wellness and our cognition. And we don't know as a society what impacts these basically like addiction habit forming devices will have long term. Rainn Wilson has a great podcast. First episode, they talked about this. And they were like, wow, all of humanity didn't consent to an experiment where we put computers in our pockets and just saw what happened. We didn't do any risk assessment. So yes, there's like a very big conversation to have here. And there's a lot of reasons why it's addictive, and it's genuinely having an impact on like our cognitive systems and how they develop. And it's having an impact on how we socialize. So just many yeses. And the positive thing to say, as I was talking to the students today, is, and we have modalities like building self-awareness, mindfulness practices to observe ourselves and to think about how we monitor and modify our interactions with these devices. And we need to be having explicit conversations with like this, just like we would about using drugs, just like we would about like, we are pleasure-seeking machines and our neuroconnections push us in those directions. So doom scrolling is built to like make you feel good and release dopamine and do it more. So I was talking to my students, are we literate about this? Do we know how to take care of it? And I really hope there are gonna be real conversations that come into curriculum, just like we do other ways of helping young people and our society like navigate what we consume. We are really consuming these devices. We're in an attention-grabbing economy, and we want to have agency over that. So big conversations, great question. And in our field, this is what we're looking at, is how is like cognitive load and exhaustion being impacted by our constant stimulation? How does that affect our social relationships? And how can we bring in modalities like mindfulness, yoga practices that help us to disconnect so we can reconnect more fully? So could talk about this for a whole course. Bob, let's put it on the schedule for next year. But I'll hand it over.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's not a field I spend very much time working in, especially with younger humans. What I've sort of supported people my age to do is to practice the agency that comes with the capacity to be in the present moment and observe what is happening. So if you are deliberately choosing to engage with a non-human intelligence, why is that? What is making that easier? What is removing the friction point, perhaps? And then how might you take that insight into your relationship with humans so that you can pull all of the other, all of the tone and body language and other pieces of information that inform good relationships. So part of it is agency. The other piece that Elli brought up is choosing to rest, which not all of us do very well, maybe because we have been conditioned that our value is equal to how much we produce, which is an interesting thing to grapple with. And so maybe it is, are you choosing these interactions because they are more restful than interactions with humans? And if so, are there other ways that you can rest? Because sometimes humans are aggravating. I don't know if you have that experience. But instead of defaulting to, I'm just going to be in relationship with an intelligence that is not human, maybe it is, some mindful walking. Maybe you do just take a nap. Maybe you engage with your senses in another way to find that rest. Maybe you parallel play with another human where you do your thing and they do their thing and you don't actually have to speak to each other, which is still relational as opposed to being in conversation. So there are other ways to play, I would suppose, but I don't have a solid answer to your specific question.
Yes, the second row.
Do you have suggestions on how to access mindfulness practice? For example, I've tried Sharon Salzberg 28-day mindfulness challenge. There's Calm, there's Headspace. Do you have suggestions?
So my general suggestion is to continue to experiment broadly, and you'll find sort of the practice that sticks for you. It will also maybe not be the same practice for a period of time, depending on what you need in the moment. There are days where I wake up and I was like, oh, everything hurts. A movement, like a mindful movement practice, is only going to make my day worse today. So maybe it is a breathing practice. Maybe it is a visualization practice. And so I'm regularly trying whatever it is the universe decides to send my way so that I have a large toolbox to choose from. Because there will be days where I'm like, okay, I have 30 seconds. That is not enough time to go outside and take a mindful walk. But I could focus on what I can see for 30 seconds to reconnect with my senses and notice what is happening for me. So I would say take advantage of all of the broad practices. If you find a teacher you like, continue to work with them. That is also a beautiful way of being in relationship with a practice or practice with a community. In yoga, we have the idea of the Sanskrit word is satsanga, the community where you work together to find truth. Sat is truth, sangha is community. And so that might be an interesting way to explore practice as well. But if you want a list of resources, please reach out to me on whatever platform you choose, and I will send you a list of resources.
Yeah, I'll jump in, just so aligned, so fun. I wrote down like, find your flavor. So also to know like, just like, you know, back to mental fitness, right? The way I work out will look different than you. I love like a group dance class. And if I was like, everyone here has to do group dance classes, it's the only way to exercise a bunch, you'd be like, I'm never doing that. So also to really give ourselves permission that mindfulness, meditation, building self-awareness, it's check out a bunch of classes, check out a bunch of different equipment, see what works for you. And you might sometimes want to target a certain muscle group and another time a different one. So different apps, different communities might speak to you at different times, and it's really nice to find a home. You know, I practice in the Plum Village Thich Nhat Hanh tradition for reasons that it really works with my nervous system. We'll share again, we have we can put up the slide for LinkedIn Connects, and also a warm welcome. I'm co-directing the Mindfulness Research Symposium and Retreat at Sick Kids this January 22-23, and we're opening registration in 2 days, but Alana here helped me get it ready to share with you tonight. So you get a secret sneak peek at it. But the idea there is to test out a bunch of practices and different modalities and kind of see what they're about. So just this resounding yes to like, not one way. Also, we're both happy to share more resources and just really encouraging you to try things. And on my end, like, there was a few months ago where I was just really busy and I was just doing a focus attention practice to like keep up a baseline. And then someone I know went through like a really deep challenge and they were really upset and hurt and angry, and I sat with them, and we need to do like practices around loving kindness to ourselves. So something different was needed. So yeah, that was my answer.
Anybody else eager to ask a question in the audience? Yes, in the corner. Hang on, Belle's got the mic for you.
Thank you. That some of the kids that you have might have ADHD, some kids that you know, and like sitting down with their eyes closed doesn't necessarily work for them. And I'm guessing that the flower watering would definitely help them. But like, what are some other practices? Because I do teach kids yoga, and I'm curious to know, pick your brain, what works for kids with ADHD.
Yeah, happy to share. And also the body work over here. I'm like, yeah. And, you know, I think a similar thing as well. And I actually had this wonderful student in a class who shared this with me and was like, also like, so focus attention. Like when I just hear those words, I panic. And then it turned out that when we talked about it and talked about what focus attention wasn't, which was perfectly sitting still with your eyes closed, that actually over time in my class, they discovered they loved the practice and it was enhancing their ability to pay attention in other spaces. So also to say, like, what is our framing of this? And that I often find almost every practice I'm aware of can be adapted to someone's nervous system if we ask that person for help. So just wanted to say also, I did some really interesting work with elementary students who identified as being on the autism spectrum. And we were talking about doing body scans where you pay attention to different parts of your body and you might offer it loving kindness. And that was just like lying down and doing that, like, did not feel safe. And so I described the practice to them and asked for their input on how we'd adapt it. And they suggested that we do it standing and we tap the parts of our body that we wanted to send love to. and just sent a kind thought. Dear shoulders, I hope you're happy today. Dear heart, I'm so glad that you're beating and keeping me alive. And we came up with this, and it really reflected that kind of the outcomes we're looking for in that practice. So I'd say, I love your question. I can send some resources that are specifically for that population, and a real encouragement, bringing this to any age group, any space. I love like context specific implementation. And so often that's like ask for input and let the practice be flexible. And I find that's like, I'll just give one example with little kids. Sometimes everyone's like, they can't sit still and meditate. And what we do often, I'll go to a class and I teach Jello versus mountain. So we talked about like the qualities of Jello are like wiggly and silly, and mountains are like solid and stable. As a class, we define it. And then I call out, and the game is, when I call out Jello, sit like Jello. When I call out mountain, sit like mountain. And I do this quickly, and then longer and longer, I just leave the mountain. And I have a room full of like kindergarten kids sitting silently for like 2 minutes. And they love it. And they ask for mountain time.
That sounds amazing. It also sounds very trauma-informed and trauma-responsive, which I love. There is this idea in yoga therapy that the care seeker has all of the answers already. It is just a matter of asking good questions, not even the right questions, just good questions that will guide them to that arrival of awareness. And that is true for little humans, that is true for older humans. And so my invitation is, as Elli very clearly already articulated, to invite them to, this is what we are trying to achieve. Classically, this is the practice. How might we modify this for you? Because most people will have at least some sense of where to begin with the shift. And then collaboratively, in one grand experiment, you can find that way together, because it will be different for every human, and it will be different for that human at that point in time. Because that human tomorrow is a different person. And so that ongoing practice of inquiry, as it were, to see what fits now. And with a group, it's even more fun because everyone has their own ideas. And so then we test and modify collectively to see what works for all of us. But so each of us can also tweak individually. Again, happy to send specific resources for that population if you reach out.
I think we're probably near end, but I wanted to just add two things. Again, just this idea I always say when I lead these practices, it's like I'm at the front of a group exercise class. So I might not be able to adjust it to you. Like if I squat too deep, like please adjust your squat. And so how can we bring in trauma-informed language in this fun way? I encourage all of you use that mental fitness model. And also, while I still have the mic, I want to thank you, because it's been lovely to sit next to another human who I can feel those shared values and that space and our like deep listening of each other. So I just wanted to make the invisible visible there, and also just to thank Bob for cooking this up, because you were like, you two are gonna have a nice time. And you were correct. So I wanted to do some, I'm an auto flower waterer. I can't help myself. Thank you.
It's been such a gift to share time and space with you. But I feel like Colin maybe has something to say. So before I cut anyone off.
Oh, no, go ahead. Continue.
No, it has been such a gift to share time and space and to learn so much from you, and to maybe get some more formal language that folks will believe when I walk into spaces. Has been such a joy. And of course, Brenda and Belle, who make all of this possible with all of the behind the scenes running around. It's no joke.
All right, well, being mindful of your time, if you'll pardon the pun, I'm going to invite Principal Bob back to the podium to give some closing comments.
All right, so I'm good. So first, once again, so many thanks. So for some reason, I've been asked to give reflective remarks. I don't know why. But the first reflective remark is, first, during mindfulness, I do a great job of having my mind wander. I am excellent at that. And I'm going to share one of my little mind wanderings. And that is, I think Niya was born to lead mindfulness meditations with that voice. Like, it is like, yes. But like, all I could think was like, this is like the idealized version of a mind, of a voice to lead a mindfulness meditation. I also, I don't type fast enough, but I positively loved Elli's definition of, self-created definition of mindfulness, and just, and especially the last two, kindness and curiosity. And I think as human beings, we could do a lot worse than try to keep that with us as much as we can. Finally, I am a behavioral economist. Behavioral economics, as many of you might know, is popularized by Nobel laureate Danny Kahneman, and he wrote this book that popularized this idea of thinking fast and thinking slow, right? And as economists, we often, I was indoctrinated to think that people think slowly. They think with their prefrontal cortex. They are rational human beings. And as Elli sort of pointed out, no, oftentimes we have this thinking fast part of our brain, right? Fight or flight, et cetera. And one thing that got me thinking as a behavioral economist, we sort of take this division as given, right? And then we're given the human frailties, et cetera, how do we design systems such that when people think fast or think with their amygdala, that they don't do too much damage or whatever. But while I was sitting here thinking was this idea of trainable skill sets, that it's not necessarily given, and this concept of interoception, right? This idea of monitoring our thought process, et cetera, and perhaps by monitoring, we can potentially modify. I still think there's a role for behavioral economists who don't let people get into too much trouble by themselves, right? But I also love the idea that we have agency in this, and we are not just sort of, being led by our amygdala, that we actually can, by monitoring, we have the possibility of modifying. Okay, so before we head out this evening, thanks are in order. And so first, thanks to my co-host and alumni ambassador, Colin. Thank you. Colin already beat me to the punch, but I have to do it again, right? Thanks go to our advancement and communication teams, Belle, Ashley, Brenda, Nikita, Alana, and Annika. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the first time I did a New College event, I forgot to thank the catering staff, and I could not sleep that night because I'm you are such a jerk. So let us thank loudly the catering staff and the New College caretaking staff who never get appreciated. And so thanks to you, our alumni, for being here tonight. As principal, one of my priorities is to find new ways to stay connected and deepen our relationship with both New College and U of T alums. And I'm so looking forward to the next time our paths cross. At some point, you're going to put your profiles back up? Yeah, and so we're going to put their LinkedIn profile. There we go. The QR codes, you can link in to either Elli or Niya, and they are yes, please do link with them. On Niya's website, Holistic Yoga Therapy, you can learn more about her work and approach and details on an upcoming retreat and symposium, where you can learn more about her work and approach. You can also learn details about an upcoming retreat and symposium that Elli is hosting in January, a 2-day gathering bringing together leading voices in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and contemplative and behavioral sciences. And so please enjoy the rest of your evening, and I hope you'll stay connected with New. Thank you very much.